ask people if they've got anything that's going to make a noise, or play a tune or anything, can you please turn it to onto silent? The meeting is being filmed. There will be a recording available, so anyone who is speaking who does not wish to appear on the camera, please make yourselves known to the operators in the corner here. And now I'll ask the Democratic Services Officer to read the emergency evacuation procedure. Thanks, Karina.
Thank you, Chair. If the continuous alarm sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. The designated exits are signposted. From this room, you can use the main door and then the main exit of the building. The assembly point for this building is in Orange Grove on the green outside Browns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And do we have any apologies for absence or substitutions, please?
There are no apologies for absence or substitutions.
Thank you. And do I have any declarations of interest from anybody on the committee? No? Okay, thank you. I have no urgent business to announce. So item 5, I'll ask the Democratic Services Officer to inform you all of the public speaking procedure. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Speakers will be called to speak immediately after the case officer has made their presentation about the application. The order of speakers and the time allowed for speaking will be as follows. First, any parish or town councils making a representation will be allowed 3 minutes. Then it will be objectors to an application who will be allowed 3 minutes. And then supporters of an application who will be allowed 3 minutes. If there is more than one objector or supporter of an application, they must share the 3 minutes allowed to each side. Ward councillors not on the committee who have indicated they wish to speak about an application may do so for a maximum of 5 minutes. Speeches will be timed by the traffic light system you can see on the table next to me. At the start, the light will be green and it will turn to amber when there is 1 minute of speaking time remaining. When the light turns red, speakers should immediately conclude their remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. So we had no site visits for this meeting, so I can go straight onto the main plans list. And if the officer is ready, we can go on to the presentation for the first item.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, this application is for the erection of 8 affordable dwellings at the storage yard adjacent to Argyle Works on the Lower Bristol Road. So here we've got a site location plan with the site outlined in red, and then next to it an aerial photograph where you can see the site surrounded by kind of the residential properties to the east and south, and then to the west there is an MOT garage. So the existing proposed site plan, so on the proposed site plans you'll note the 2 large trees to the front of the site. They are the TPO trees which are referenced in the report. The main accommodation block is set back within the site with the parking area located to the rear. And then we've got the proposed floor plan. So the ground floor plan is 3 one-bedroom properties. They're all on one level. And then on the second floor, you've got 5 two-bedroom flats, and they're split over 2 levels. So on the second floor is the living accommodation. And then here you've got the third floor, which has got the 2 bedrooms and bathroom, and all of the apartments are dual aspect. So the front and rear elevations of the block, so the gap in the middle, you can see the number 11 on that, that's the access way to the parking area to the rear, and then at the back you've obviously got stairs for fire escape. And then the side elevations. And then some site photographs. So these 2 images were taken stood on the opposite side of the Lower Bristol Road. So the site is gated at the moment with a walled access. You can see the 2 trees kind of flanking the existing access that have the TPO on them. And then a couple of additional photos. So you've got a residential property next door, and then you've got the MOT and repair garage on the west side of the site. And then some photos taken inside the site. So at the moment the yard is vacant, just sort of used for storage, and then there are residential properties surrounding it. So the application is recommended for permission, subject to the conditions in the update report and the committee report.
Thank you very much. I think we have one speaker on this one. If Chris Beaver is here, could come to the front. Thank you. whenever you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Chair. That's working okay? Yeah. Yes, we're acting as planning consultants for the council as landowner in relation to this application. The proposal was formed by an iterative pre-application process with planning officers testing a number of different sort of options for the site. And we also did a online pre-application consultation with immediate neighbours, which didn't generate much in the way of a response. Following the submission of the application, we've made a number of sort of minor amendments to the scheme, including resiting the building further away from the protected trees on the site frontage. And that has enabled us to provide more green infrastructure and a better sort of interface with the public realm. The general sort of planning benefits of this scheme are, firstly, a reuse of a vacant brownfield site. The 8 homes will make a contribution to 5-year land supply in Bath. We think that the proposal will offer a positive public realm and urban design enhancement along one of the key sort of public arterial roads into Bath, quite a prominent site. In terms of sustainability, the design approach has adopted a fabric-first approach, looking at insulation and so forth, and it will also include air source heat pumps, and in the assessments that's been submitted exceeds the sort of minimum sustainability appraisal requirements. The scheme is also fully flood resilient, as a small part of the site lies in flood zone 2, so that's fully flood resilient. The access meets the required sort of standards of visibility, and there's on-site parking with EV charging. As I mentioned, we've got, it's a small site, but we've managed to deliver some green infrastructure. And then the other benefits of the proposal relate to, local employment and supply chain expenditure during development itself. I've also been asked just to read a quote from Graham Saborn, the head of housing at Baines Council, and if I can just sort of read his comments out to you. He has asked me to draw your attention to how this 100% affordable housing scheme will positively contribute to meeting the housing needs of Bath residents. There are currently over 5,800 households on the council's housing register, with 3,200 of these households requiring one-bedroom accommodation. These socially rented homes will make a small but positive contribution to meeting need. In addition, 3 of the homes will be prioritised for care leavers, further assisting a vulnerable cohort of residents and providing accommodation that the market does not typically supply.
Could you bring your comments to conclusion?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, on that basis, we commend the scheme to you and hope that you can support it today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions to the officer? Councillor Jackson.
I've got 2 questions. Firstly, I'd like to look at the frontage again and see how the trees fit in, and the asymmetry of it slightly irritates me, but I mean, I'd just like to have a quick look at that. But the main question substantive question I wanted to ask is on page 26, it says, it explains about the affordable housing, and we've just heard Graham Saborn's comment. It says, a legal agreement cannot be sought in this instance because the council is the applicant and cannot enter into a legal agreement with itself. So I wondered if we could have an explanation of how this property will be safeguarded as affordable, which I assume is 80% of the market rate.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. So I've just, excuse me, I've just put the image on the screen. I can see what you mean about the trees and the asymmetry, but I believe that this tree is actually, the trees are actually existing. So the 2 which are in the centre are the TPO trees. As Chris Beaver alluded to, the scheme has been revised so that the building's been pushed back so that we're outside the root protection zone and canopy area of these trees, allowing some room for future growth. So there's no objection from the tree officer. So that's the frontage. In terms of the lack of a legal agreement. I'm sure David Brown will be able to chip in a minute, but we have recommended a condition for an affordable housing scheme, which is a pre-commencement condition, so that we can secure all the details of the affordable housing through a condition as opposed to a legal agreement. David, I don't know if you want to talk about that.
So yes, it's one of the quirks of council applications, and the way in which Section 106 has been drafted is it's not normally possible to put in place a planning obligation, i.e. a 106 agreement. Therefore, it's been secured through condition.
So, I mean, it would, in theory, be possible for a future administration to come along and sell these houses?
That's the purpose of the condition. So the condition contains the tie that would usually have been placed in a 106 obligation had it not been for the fact that the council is applicant. But the same tie now appears as a condition.
Answer all your questions, Councillor Jackson. Thank you. Councillor Bromley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I just got a couple of questions, actually. One was about the contaminated land assessment, and a mention of volatile organic compounds. I just wondered what they were, really. And the other question was about the cycle spaces, which seem to have, the numbers seem to have been reduced. I mean, is this because because of the trees and the whole sort of build mass has been moved back?
Thank you, Councillor Bromley. So yes, in terms of contaminated land, I am not wholly sure what those compounds are, but that is, so we consulted with the Environment Agency, mainly due to the flood risks actually, but they did flag the issues with the contamination in the report. They have recommended some quite strict conditions which have been recommended and attached to the decision, will be attached to the decision notice if permitted, which kind of recommend further survey and restrictions on piling works and other methods. So we're satisfied that at the moment we've got sufficient detail and the conditions can secure additional details later on. In terms of the cycle parking, yes, there is a shortfall in cycle spaces in line with the current adopted standards. And yes, this is, I'm just going to go back to the floor plan here. So on the ground floor plan, you can see the greyed out area inside the building. That is actually a cycle and bin storage area. I mean, I think the shortfall of parking obviously is an issue which we have flagged, hence why this is a departure from the development plan. But the site is very constrained, and obviously you've got the two trees at the front, and the pushing back of the building to protect those has obviously reduced kind of the hard standing area for, you know, cycle storage and vehicular parking further. I think I don't know how well people know this stretch of the Lower Bristol Road, but for officers, having the green landscaping at the front of the site is a positive, because it's quite a, you know, it's quite an over hard landscaped area. So yes, there is a lack of cycle parking, but that's something that officers have weighed against the benefits and come to the judgment that overall the scheme's acceptable. But that's obviously for the committee to kind of make their own view on.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hodge.
Hello, thank you. I've just got some, they're just really on minor points actually, just to check we've explored all these options. And I just wondered about EV charging, whether you'd, whether that's mentioned anywhere, or whether it was explored at all. Also the LCR 9, our policy about incorporating some food growing. I can see that the site is constrained, but I wondered whether you make mention of the Juliet balconies. I'm not quite sure that they will in reality provide an opportunity, but was that really explored thoroughly through the process? And also there are a number of other sustainable construction measures that you said could be secured by condition, which I think means they're not in the conditions at the moment, but is there any reason why they're not? So the water efficiency and the rainwater harvesting. And the final thing I wanted to ask was about the boundary treatment. So the existing wall has rubblestone coursing in it, and there's mention of retaining some element of the rubblestone coursing, so it fits in with the rest of that stretch of the road, and there is a condition on materials, but the condition on the boundary treatment doesn't make any requirement to include rubblestone coursing. And I wondered if there was a delegate to permit, whether that could be added in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodge. I will try and pick everything up, but sorry if I don't. So on EV charging, I believe the spaces do offer EV charging. Yes, they do. There's no condition securing that, simply because building regulations now mean that it has to be installed. So that's not something I put as a condition. Obviously, if we delegate to it, we can do, but I don't think it's necessary in this case to do so. In terms of food growing, I will just, here we go. So yes, LCR 9 does obviously encourage opportunities for food growing, although I myself haven't seen us refuse or know of an application that's been refused on those grounds. Obviously, yes, the Juliet balconies, they could be used for window boxes, so there is an opportunity there. You know, whether or not occupants use it that way, we can't really control. And obviously, to the front of the site as well, and to the rear to some extent, there are spaces which, you know, veg boxes, etc., could be positioned. So officers are satisfied that there are opportunities for food growing. Whether or not residents use the site that way, you know, is something that we can't really control. In terms of the sustainable construction checklist and the rainwater conditions, they are details which could have been provided up front, and they weren't. We very often on new housing sites attach conditions for water butts and things like that, details, and then that they're installed pre-occupation. So that's very normal for a site such as this, for those details not to be provided up front. So we're confident that, you know, that can be met through condition. And in terms of the materials, yes, that could be put if, I'm just going to go to the elevation, no, the wall's not on there, apologies. That could be something, if we do go with delegate to permit, that could be added into that condition. I'm more than happy for that to be added in. A sample panel of the rubble stone walling would be good.
Okay, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I've just got a question about parking. So we know that this part of Bath is an absolute nightmare when it comes to parking issues. And the application is 7 places short of meeting our current parking standards. So my first question is, when we bring in the new parking standards with the new partial updates, how will that figure change, if at all? And secondly, I mean, I've sat through hours and hours of LDF meetings, policy meetings, to look at parking standards, and Baines have created parking standards, and now in their own application they've chosen to ignore their own parking standards. That just seems a bit odd to me. If we're going to create policies, we should be adhering to them, surely.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. So yes, against the current standards, that there is a shortfall. I believe against the new parking standards, there would be a shortfall of 1.25 spaces, but with the accessibility assessment, I believe that there would be a reduction which would make it policy compliant. Tom might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's correct. So under the new standards, it would be policy compliant. Obviously, we're not giving those standards much weight at this stage. Yes, you are correct. We are obviously, you know, going against, for want of a better term, the council's adopted policy, hence why it has been advertised as a departure. I think here, you know, I, as the case, have taken the view that there are a number of significant benefits to this scheme. We do departures on other schemes. It's not, you know, this isn't kind of groundbreaking for this particular application. I think putting aside that the council is the applicant, you know, whoever the applicant was, I would have come to the same conclusion. I think in particular here is obviously it is in a sustainable location. It's very close to a number of public transport links. You've got the retail park opposite. There are supermarkets in the vicinity. So that's weighed into the balance. I think as well the fact that they're all affordable dwellings. There is lots of research papers which show that car ownerships for affordable properties are generally lower anyway, especially the way that the council are intending to use these properties and for the people who they're intended to be used for. It's not expected that it would have the same sort of level of car ownership as a market scheme would have. So that's all things which have weighed into the balance, but yes, that, you know, we are still in a position where it's a departure from policy, and, you know, if committee wants to come to a different view in that balance and consider it's unacceptable and refusable on that basis, then you'd be justified to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Crossley had a question.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased about the EV charging for the cars. Is the same going to be for the bikes in the same shed? Because more and more people are buying electric bikes now. So will there be charging points next to the bike racks?
I don't believe that this is something included in the scheme, and I'm not sure whether that's something which is required under building regulations.
Okay. Any more questions from anyone? Right, we can move to the debate then. Who would like to start that? Eleanor Jackson.
Well, it's not really a debating point. This has got so many virtues to it that it would be hard, I think, to refuse this application. And I don't think we could justify a refusal on the basis that there aren't enough car parking spaces. Although I think it should be noted that people on low wages are very often carers or health workers and do need a vehicle. But, you know, that they would know what they were going into before they went into it. So there you are. What I was wondering was whether it would not be more appropriate, in view of the points that have been raised about water harvesting and e-bikes and so on, if we didn't make this delegate to permit. I'm wondering if it's really at a stage of completion that it could be just straightforward permitted, or whether delegate to permit might be more appropriate, and I'd be very happy to propose that if the officer finds that acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Any more contributions? Councillor Crossley.
I'd be very happy to second Eleanor Jackson on delegate to permit. I think, from my own perspective, I think this is a really ambitious scheme. It's really addressing some of the needs that we need within our society, rather than the needs of developers for a change. And the reason I'd like to delegate permit is I'd like to see about how we get more charging for the bikes, because more and more people are looking at electric bikes. You see people even cycling up Bathwick Hill on electric bikes now. In fact, you see elderly people, such as myself, cycling up Bathwick Hill and other hills around Bath. So it is a very important part and a growing important part of the change. So I think if we delegate to permit, then we can look at how we make sure we provide equally for bikes and e-scooters as well as cars. And I think that's going to be a major thing. So I think the applicant and the planning officers are to be commended on how they've developed and evolved this scheme according to the reports and the chairs. And I think, to me, I think this is a completely acceptable use of this site, and it will be much better view coming into Bath than the dereliction that's currently there. So I'm more than happy to delegate to permit, or second to delegate to permit.
Okay, thank you. So we don't actually have a motion on the table yet, but Councillor Jackson said she will. I'll just take something from Councillor Hodge.
So I'd just like to agree, I would have seconded this as well. I fully support this proposal. I think it's an exemplar proposal for 8 affordable dwellings on the Lower Bristol Road, and unlike so many that come before us, particularly PBSA, it doesn't overdevelop the plot, it doesn't seek to exceed the building heights, it retains trees at the front of the property, it's exceeded local national space standards for the property. So I feel very positive about it, and although I've made some minor points in trying to achieve a little bit extra with the sustainable criteria, I think the two possible points I'd like to see in the delegate permit is the rubble, a little bit of rubble cut stone coursing in the front wall, and if it's not too much problem for the developer, the rainwater harvesting, because I think that will then make it possible for people to grow veg if they wanted to, because without water it would be difficult. So that might be two things. If people are in agreement, we might add, but overall I think it's a great proposal.
Thank you. Just before I go again to Councillor Jackson, Deputy Head of Planning would like to comment.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to, before you go to the vote, just clarify what the delegate to permit is seeking to achieve, so officers are absolutely clear. it's quite straightforward regarding the materials and the sample panel. I think that's probably something that can be quite straightforwardly added in, but there's some other matters relating to the EV charging of bicycles, and obviously conditions have to meet the conditions test, they have to be necessary and reasonable, etc. And if the applicant during discussions is unable to provide anything along the lines that you're suggesting, because you appear to be leaving it to officers to have that negotiation, are you happy that officers will be able to secure what they feel is necessary and meets the conditions tests, and without bringing it back to committee in terms of delegate to permit, just so that we need to be absolutely clear?
So, would you like to put your mic on?
Formally propose that we delegate to permit.
Okay, so we have delegate to permit proposed by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Crossley. At the moment, we have the boundary treatment materials and potentially rainwater harvesting and EV charging for scooters and bikes, I think. So but understood that that is a condition that may or may not be able to be negotiated, but we'll leave that to the officer.
Can I, sorry to interrupt, condition 12, Councillor Hodge, does actually, I've just noticed, require a sample panel of the front boundary wall showing the reconstruction. Are you happy with that wording, or would you like it to be more specific in terms of the rubble stone coursing?
Yes, I prefer it to be more specific, because it can be a sample of anything, couldn't it? It could just be ashlar block, and I think points were made about keeping the character, and, you know, even having a strip makes a difference, I think.
Yep, that's fine. I'll amend that condition. Thank you.
Okay, great. Councillor Davis?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think the scheme is fine, and the updated report already had delegated permit, so presumably that condition will be included in there, which is to do with some wording that the officer and the applicants had agreed. I think it's, as I've said, I mean, it's very rare that we have something come before us. It's actually answering all the questions that we're asking, so I think this is really good, and can't help but support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Do I have any more contributions to the debate before we go to the vote? No? Okay, so the motion we have on the table is to delegate to permit as stated. All those in favour? That's unanimously passed. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the officer. If we can have switch over for the next item now, please. You're all happy to carry on, I assume. Okay, when you're ready. Thank you.
Hi everybody. So the second item today, we're looking at a extension at number 24, the Tyning. Details up on screen, but we're looking essentially at the single-storey rear extension, a first-floor side extension, which is above the existing garage, and the loft conversion with a pitch roof rear dormer. The scheme also involves the replacement of a few windows and doors from the existing property and some modifications to the existing driveway. So up on screen, we've got the block plan and an aerial image of the same property. So the block plan's highlighted the semi-detached property in red here, and the number 24 shows the position of the house on the east side of the Tyning Road, north of its adjoining neighbour, south of its adjacent neighbour. The existing and proposed block plans on screen are north orientated to match the aerial imagery and the block plan we've seen above. So the front of the property is here to the left or the west where the cars enter the drive. This is the hipped roof of the existing house, and then the flat roof of the existing garage here to the side, and then the rear garden. As shown on the proposed block plan, you can see the first floor side extension forming a hipped roof of its own. It's been set back from the front elevation and it is set down from the ridge, which is why there's this break shown on the plan. The rear dormer is shown here with its pitched roof facing out to the east, as well as the flat roof rear extension to the side, to the rear. And then the driveway works here are opening up the entrance point and providing a second parking space on the front of the driveway here on some levelled ground. Moving to the existing floor plans shown on screen, ground floor on the left, first floor on the right. And to the proposed scheme, the ground and the first floor plans. So the main difference that you'll note is on the ground floor is the rear extension, as well as some internal alterations to reconfigure the space. And to the first floor, you have the additional living space above the existing garage. So I'll quickly pop back to existing and then back to the proposed for a bit of context. And then the second floor plan is new because currently there isn't a second floor plan. It's just empty loft space. So the access stairwell is not positioned above the existing staircase. It is actually positioned within the space of the existing rear bedroom and provides the bedroom up on the second floor as well. The elevations, as seen on screen, this is looking from the front. The most noticeable difference is the side extension, which is positioned above the existing garage. It has followed the eaves line of the extended eaves to the side, and it's been stepped substantially down from the ridge as well. You'll also note the change in the front door and the garage door. Looking from the side view, you can see the side extension has been added on to the side profile above the existing flat roof garage here, as well as the single-storey rear extension shown on its side profile. The rear elevations, as expected, we can still see the side extension here, so mirrored view as you see from the front. You can also see the rear dormer with its pitched roof, as well as the single-storey rear extension at the rear here. Moving to some photographs of the front of the property and the rear of the property. As well as a photograph out of the first floor rear window. I'm sure we'll have some discussion about some overlooking a little bit later on, but this demonstrates the views as existing from the rear windows. We'll also, I'm sure, have some discussions about the rear dormer itself. And this photo is of the existing property, but mostly of the neighbouring property here, which shows how there are some rear projecting hip roofs already as a second story feature on many of the properties within this street. Some additional photos of the front to show a bit more of the street scene and the character of the area. You can see the application site here, its neighbouring property, which is of a differing design. What's important to note here is how the original design of the neighbouring dwellings have a already set down ridge and hipped roof, for which the character of the new extension will somewhat match. This is the same neighbouring dwelling seen from the other side with its single-storey garages to the side. On the opposite side of the street, the character does change quite significantly. So here are a few examples of some dwellings on the other side of the road showing the more Victorian style, with some mansard roof examples with some front-facing dormer windows. These are also present to the rear. Yes, this is just showing a little bit more of the context of the area, and we can flick back and forth as necessary. The application is recommended for permission for the reasons outlined in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 4 statements to be read. If I could ask Dr. David Sweetnam to go up to the front for the first one. You're good to put the microphone on and start whenever you're ready.
Good morning. My name is Dr. David Sweetnam. I represent the 11 households in the Tyning and Tyning End who've objected to this application. There have also been objections from the 2 ward councillors and the Widcombe Association. At the outset, I would say that all the objections have actually been very supportive of the property being updated and modernised. The objectors have proposed viable alternatives to the current application. It's the scale and mass of the development and its impact on a number of properties in the conservation area that's of great concern. There are 2 key objections. The first is the proposed second floor extension above the garage is out of scale with the neighbours and would affect the distinctive character of the houses in the conservation area. The application would fundamentally change the street scene and set a precedent for other similar developments along that side of the Tyning. It would affect the symmetry of its immediate neighbour, number 23. No other house on that side of the Tyning has a 2-storey extension built above the garage, nor do any of the houses in Tyning End backing onto the Tyning. The application represents an approximate 40% increase in habitable floor area. Its immediate neighbours have professional home working, children, and 3 generations of one family living in the houses that are significantly smaller. The extension would overshadow 4 properties, numbers 23 and 25 the Tyning, and numbers 3 and 5 Tyning End. Most impacted would be number 25 the Tyning, but the other 3 properties are not mentioned in the application and they would be affected. The second key objection is the proposed rear dormer window on the back elevation. This would have an adverse effect on the residential amenity of neighbouring properties by overlooking. And despite what the officer said, that is only a hipped roof at the rear. There is no rear dormer on number 25. No other houses on that side of the Tyning, nor houses at the back of the Tyning have a rear dormer. It's inappropriate due to the proximity of the houses behind. And this window would overlook 5 properties and into the bedrooms and kitchens of 3 properties. Now, although I know this is not a specific planning issue, but the application indicates that the garage is merely being built over and not demolished. This is not feasible, given the garage's existing single-skin construction. As a consequence, and in order to achieve the floor levels drawn, the roof ridge height will have to be raised to a level greater than that indicated on the plan submitted. In conclusion, there are viable alternatives to the development that the applicant could consider. As objectors, we would ask that the committee refuse the current application or be minded to arrange a committee site visit to visualise the impact of this application before making a final decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now if I could have Tim Elson, please. Start when you're ready. I don't think, is your microphone on? No, it is.
Good morning, my name is Tim Elson. I'm the owner of the property and applicant of this planning proposal. Thank you for letting me to address the committee. We are a family of 4 with 2 children aged 8 and 4 and see the house as the forever home that our children will grow up in. The location of the house is the main draw as our children's school will be within walking distance, which is of special importance as my partner is unable to drive due to a disability. The property is in a sorry state of repair without mains hot water or central heating. So we bought it recognising the significant work required to bring it up to modern standards. We have worked closely with our architect and an external planning consultant to develop a scheme that provides the space we require within the set planning regulations. We collectively believe that we have done this, and the engagement we've had with the Baines planning officer during both pre-planning and the main planning application also supports this view. The change in working arrangements following COVID means that both my partner and I work partially from home. And I work as a project manager on infrastructure projects and Kevin is an art director for children's books. So it's important we both have separate spaces where we can work without disturbing each other. The design floor plan allows for this along with a bedroom for each of us. You'll have noticed that from the plans that these bedrooms offices are very modest in size, which is representative of the house, which will retain a relatively small footprint following the proposed development, especially when compared to houses across the road or adjacent houses. It will, however, provide us everything we need to live in the house for the long term. We are naturally saddened that some of our future neighbours aren't happy with our application. If there are other options for the space, we'd be happy to compromise with our proposals and respond more favourably to these concerns. Unfortunately, this has not been an option for us due to the limitations of the site. We believe that our house, once completed, will improve the character and appearance of the street. The new windows, doors and front garden landscaping will, in our opinion, vastly improve what is already there. The side extension, as said, is set back in keeping within the look and feel of the main house. And the additional storey above the garage is a commonly seen means to extend a building of this age, and it would provide much needed additional floor space. The road itself does not have a uniform arrangement when it comes to garages, with a variety of different arrangements present, some being set to the back of the garden, some at the front, some having pitched roofs, and some having only carports. We believe that many of the garages have already been converted into living spaces, especially as the garages are no longer suitable for modern-day cars. The street level is lower than the house, and as the side extension will be set back, the visual impact on the street will be limited. There is a two-storey extension at the other end of the tining, while many of the houses on the road behind our house, Tining End, have completed the same type of extension above the garage, so our development would not be uncharacteristic of the area. The rear extension provides the space for the family kitchen, diner and office. This is the north side of the adjoining neighbour, so will not impact on their direct sunlight. We hope that we achieve an approved scheme today which provides us with the long-term space that our family requires and are keen to start development at the earliest opportunity so we can move in and start the next stage of our lives.
Thank you. Okay, we have statements from both the ward councillors. These will be read by our Democratic Services Officer. Which one are you going to do first, Karina?
It's a combined statement.
Oh, it's a combined statement. Okay, when you're ready. Thank you.
Okay, this statement on behalf of Councillors Alison Bourne and Councillor Winston Duguid. The views of ward councillors and local residents in the Tyning and Widcombe Association Committee is that this planning application should not be supported in its current form. The Widcombe Association does not generally comment on planning applications, but will when there are concerns about precedent and the wider implications of decisions. The Tyning is a residential street with east-facing Edwardian properties on one side of the road and pairs of 1930s semi-detached properties on the opposite side. These 1930s homes have small front and back gardens. Their rear gardens back onto similar-sized gardens and semi-detached properties in Tyning End, which runs parallel to the Tyning. The 1930s homes in the Tyning have a single-storey garage attached to each house. These garages sit adjacent to the garage attached to the next pair of houses. The paired single-storey garages provide wide gaps between the pairs of houses which allow light through to the houses behind in Tyning End, in this case numbers 3 and 5 Tyning End. Many of these 1930s homes have been modified and extended over the years since they were built, but those changes have not impacted on the overall homogeneity of the street or on neighbouring properties, and the character of the streetscape has been maintained. In the 80 years since the houses were built, all previous extensions in the Tyning have preserve the gaps between the pairs of houses, but that will not be the case if this permission is granted. The above garage extension will block light from the house next door, number 25, and the houses behind, numbers 3 and 5 Tyning End. This will be particularly problematic in the winter months. A single-storey ground-level extension, as has been built on neighbouring properties, will be more acceptable, as this has been done with a neighbouring attached property, number 23, the Tyning. The loft extension proposed in this application also includes a dormer window that will look directly onto the houses and rear gardens of numbers 1, 3 and 5 Tyning End. The dormer window would be less than 20 metres from the back of 3 and 5 Tyning End. All other loft conversions in the 1930s properties in the Tyning and Tyning End have only Velux type windows. These are less obtrusive and do not overlook other properties and gardens. There is a practical concern that the upper floor of the proposed development would not be viable based on the submitted drawings, as there are currently significant floor level differentials between the house and the garage. The necessary adjustments to the submitted plans are likely to make the extension higher than shown on the current plans. The Tyning is situated in a conservation area. The conservation character appraisal undertaken for Widcombe notes that the unsympathetic alteration of unlisted buildings is recognised as a threat to the character of the conservation area and is therefore seen as undesirable. There is general recognition that number 24, the tining, would benefit from repair and updating, and there would be no objection to a sympathetic development that is in keeping with other houses in the area. Sadly, the current planning application is an overdevelopment of the site that will cause overlooking and overshadowing. It could set an unfortunate precedent, resulting in a significant alteration to the conservation area. We ask that the committee takes these concerns seriously and does not allow this application to progress.
Thank you, Karina. Questions? Councillor McPhee.
So the key thing is this overshadowing of the light over the garage. Do you have any photos, or could you comment on that? Because that seems to be the key objection.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, a daylight and sunlight study was submitted with the application, which is on the application file. I don't have the details of it on the presentation file, I'm afraid. The block plan and aerial imagery is quite helpful in this regard, in which we can see the application site is mostly to the south, slightly southwest of the neighbouring property at number 25. And it's considered this one is the most likely to be impacted by any overshadowing, with the sun obviously rotating around to the south. The development is positioned adjacent to the side of the neighbouring property, so it's not adjacent to the garden space, and it's not considered to overshadow any primary windows into sort of front or rear living spaces. Additionally, with how the property is set down from the ridge and the eaves, it's considered that this softens the overall impact as opposed to providing a gable end right on the neighbouring boundary. So in terms of residential amenity, it's not considered to be resulting in an unacceptable impact. Again, there is a daylight and sunlight study provided with the application. Sorry, I'll just flick back to the aerial imagery for the context. Yes, there is a daylight and sunlight study provided with the application, which finds that any harm is negligible in this instance. But obviously that's a decision for you guys to make today as well.
Okay, Councillor Davis.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. A couple of times it was said about the garage being the height sort of not being right, but I would imagine that the plans that have come through to you are quite clear, because it implied that if they want to build this out in the end, they're going to have to come back, but that doesn't seem to be probably what's there. And the other one is, there was talk in one of the statements about the gap between the garages and so on, but is this coming further out on the footprint above the garage as it is? It wasn't my impression, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, my understanding is that the footprint is remaining the same on top of the existing garage. I can, of course, double check this for you if required. Going back to your first query about the feasibility of the scheme with the internal head heights, of course they will have to conform with building regulations. As we can see on the scheme, the eaves height is significantly lower than the eaves of the main dwelling, in an attempt to keep the overall height and the massing down slightly. I don't have sectional drawings to show you today. However, visiting the site, and as seen on the first floor plans, let me scroll back up to those, the floor level on the inside is set at a lower head height, a lower floor level as well. So once you come up the existing stairwell, there's an additional 5 stairs up to the ground level of the first floor, and then into the extension it's only 3 or 4 stairs, so it's at a lower floor level internally. So we don't consider it to be unfeasible.
Okay. Councillor Bromley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. It's just a question about the query about the garage being single-skinned, and how will it be enabled to support a sort of second story, basically?
Yeah, sure thing. I don't have a very good answer for you, I'm afraid, because that will be more of a building control matter, whether the structural integrity of the garage can support the extension or not. Worst case scenario, it can't, then the garage will have to be demolished and rebuilt substantially to enable the works on the same footprint as the plans enable. So again, that's kind of a building control matter really towards the end of the process.
Councillor Hodge.
Hello. Sorry, I've got two questions. One about the dormer, and I just wondered if you showed there's a section cut through the house in the documents on the website. I don't know whether you showed that, because it shows quite. I just got a question about the section of the dormer, because it seems to come out really at roof level and come down to the back elevation, which was quite prominent on the side elevation. Do you have anything that shows that?
I haven't included the sectional drawings today, I'm afraid. However, on the side elevation, you can see a similar profile where the top of the dormer is set slightly below the ridge height of the main dwelling, but it is close. It's important to remember it's a dual pitch dormer, so that's only actually the ridge height, whereas the eaves will slant down towards the sides. But this is the best view I can provide for you today on the presentation file.
And in terms of the actual volume, although volume measurements aren't critical here, do you have the image that shows each different addition as an added volume onto the property against the original? Or?
I don't have the volume calculations again because it's not a greenbelt application. It's not something that's been scrutinised quite so heavily as we would sometimes see. In this case, it's really assessing sort of the appearance of the extensions in connection to the existing dwelling. So yeah, sorry, I don't have the volume calculations. It's more of a visual assessment.
It's available in the documents. I just couldn't find it just now, but it shows the different colours additions, doesn't it? And did we think it was approximately 40% increase? I'm not sure.
Yes, I know what you mean. It was in the design and access statement where it showed the 3D rendering of the different elements. 40% does sound, again, reasonable, but I don't have the numbers in front of me to confirm.
Thank you.
Okay, do you have any more questions before we move to the debate? A question?
Just one question.
Yeah, carry on, Councillor McPhee.
So the dormer, is it true that that would be the first dormer on that side of the street?
Yes, that would be right, yes.
And that doesn't trouble you?
Not in this case, given the design of the dormer. It's not as bulky or dominant as we do sometimes see with dormers. And I will flick down to the photographs again of the rear of the neighbouring properties, which have this roof form providing this hip roof which extends to the rear. So there is sort of more massing on some of these neighbouring roofs already. So the fact that there's going to be a new dormer on this roof isn't of as concern to us.
You have another question, Councillor Hodge?
Yes, just for that image of the property next door, that semi-detached property is of a different style, isn't it? So
yes.
Both wings are exactly the same. It's of a different period and a different style. But we're talking about adding a dormer onto a different style of property that doesn't have them currently.
Yeah, that's correct. The application site is almost quite unique within the street that it is positioned. So I'll flick back to the front image. So it's as you can see on screen, it's a semi-detached two-storey property with these overhanging eaves, the garages to the side and the bay windows to the front, whereas the neighbouring properties along this side of the street share this design with one another, where you've got the front projecting gables as well and the slightly set back hip to the side. So yes, it is, the application site is almost more unique in the street it's positioned. It's more akin to the dwellings on the road to the rear, which is Tyning End from memory. I'll refer to the map in just a moment. So the Tyning End properties, the rear of which can be seen on this photograph here, which share these sort of overhanging eave design. But yes, correct. In this street, this property is of its own character.
Okay, you had a question, Councillor Jackson?
Yes. I don't know if there's an answer, like most theological questions. It seems to me, if I've got it right, in the history of this dwelling, that well, it looks neglected, to be quite frank, and therefore the proposal the whole developmental proposal will improve in a conservation area where we are bound to look at applications in the light of whether they can serve or enhance the area. The objectors, of course, are saying that it will not enhance the area, but anyway, that's for the committee to judge. Am I right in thinking that we need to hold that in balance on one side, the fact that it may improve and enhance the conservation area, against, on the other hand, the fact that we're setting a precedent? And you know what Jones is like, we might find the whole row getting these sort of dormer windows. So I wondered if officers could illuminate the question of how much weight we should put to the fact that this would be setting a precedent in this particular neck of the woods.
Okay, thank you. I don't know who would like to answer that, the planning officer or legal officer?
I can start and then you can fill in if I miss any bits, if you like. The planning balance or the weight that you give to certain aspects is going to be a decision for yourself and the committee. There is, of course, the discussion point around the precedent that this might be setting. While precedent is it is becoming more of a material consideration these days, and we do have to consider whether seeing more side extensions of this nature and rear dormers in this nature in this street would be harmful or not. In this case, it's been done quite sensitively. It matches the design and character of the host property. It's remained subservient and it matches the materials, so it's not considered to be harmful. Therefore, if similar extensions came forward in the street, the precedent itself isn't considered to be harmful to us under, identical circumstances. But of course, that's for yourselves to determine for yourselves. And then the weight is again, it's how much weight you consider should be added to these things.
Thank you. If I could ask the legal officer if he has anything to add on precedent.
It might be useful if I provide a very short overview of how precedent works in the planning system in these kind of scenarios. So it is possible for precedent to be a material consideration in the planning balance. The first matter would be for you to make a planning judgment about whether or not a precedent would actually be created. The second would be whether it would be harmful, and then you would weigh it in the balance in the normal way, along with other factors in favour or against. I should add that when assessing whether a precedent would be created, some evidence is required, and to quote from case law, mere fear or generalised concern is not enough. However, in some situations, the facts are said to speak for themselves, and an example given is where you have a row of identical terraced houses. It is seen as obvious that if an extension is granted out the back of one, it may lead to similar applications in relation to others. So that's the brief overview. Do let me know if you have any specific questions on that.
Chair, in the light of my recent operation, I wonder if the committee would allow me a 2-minute break.
Yes, I'd be happy with that. Okay. Pause for 2 minutes.
Reference has been made to, the dormer window. Reference has been made to the gap to tiny end being about a bit under 20 metres. Now, a metre is longer than a yard, so we're talking about 22 yards. In terms of the topography, is tiny end higher than the houses we see in that picture, or are they set down, or are they on the same level?
The application site is set at a slightly lower ground level than the properties to the rear. So on the screen, the photos, it's hard to tell the elevational changes, but the application site is this building here. The garden slopes up quite steeply at the very beginning, and then it's more of a shallow but still uphill slope towards the back of the garden, where you can then see the taller retaining wall and fence for the rear.
So just to confirm that, so in fact, people in from windows in tiny end would be looking down on this property. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, any more questions before we move to the debate? No? Who would like to open the debate? Councillor Bromley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, having walked along the road, I mean, it is a very uniform stretch of houses, it is true. And between each house is a very clearly defined gap over the garages showing the light coming through. So this obviously would, it's very true, impact the uniformity of that side of the street. Having said that, though, the side extension over the garage would be subservient to the house, so there would be an impact, but maybe, it's hard to sort of judge how significant it would be. But yes, there is very definitely an impact on the uniformity of that side of the street, yeah.
Okay, anybody else like to contribute to the debate? Councillor Hounsell?
Thank you. I am minded to support the application. The applicant mentioned personal circumstances, and I think we all understand that personal circumstances have no part in our decision-making. We're just looking at the plans that are being proposed. Any changes would be there for many years. We look at each application individually in the particular circumstances. However, I am reminded of application that we considered very recently at Lambourne Road in Keynsham. Building above the garage is a very common desire. Also, extensions at the rear. To my mind, the only concern I might have had is the dormer window. However, it is relatively small, and I think the distance to the properties in Tiny End is sufficient for people not to worry over much about overlooking. People don't stare out their windows trying to look at their neighbours. And there are many examples where properties are closer together than is suggested here. So I'll listen to the debate, but I'm minded to support the officer recommendation to permit.
Thank you, Councillor Hounsell. Councillor Hodge.
Thank you. I just following on from Councillor Hounsell, I think the Lambourne Road semi-detached consideration wasn't in a conservation area, if I remember correctly. And I think this is the key consideration here, the policy in the conservation area and the policy relating to local character and distinctiveness. I think the case about people's lifestyle, this is a very sought after road, a very high profile road in the centre of the conservation area in Widdicombe, with 4-bedroomed houses, with a lot of families living modern lives, working from home within their houses. So this isn't an exception, I don't think. Walking to the local school, working from home, conducting a family life. I feel that the decision hinges on an appreciation of the conservation area. We are duty-bound to pay special attention to preserve and enhance it, and the local character and distinctiveness. And I feel we should have a site visit to be, and I'd like to propose a site visit to be really sure on those points.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hodge. Do I have a seconder for a site visit? Councillor Hughes, are you happy to second that?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, has anybody on the committee got any comments to make on the site visit motion before we take a vote? No? Okay, so we have a motion for a site visit put forward by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Hughes. All those in favour? Sorry, 6. And those against? So that is carried. So that ends the discussion on this one. We will put that forward for a site visit and discuss it again at the next meeting. Thank you. Okay, so that ends the main list for the day. Item 9. Sorry, yes, I missed the minutes, didn't I? I don't know how I did that. Thank you, Councillor Hounsell. So, sorry, can we go back to item 6 then? Minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated. Are these approved with current record? Councillor Jackson?
I'll propose they're correct, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Hounsell?
Chair, just to flag up that there's a minor change which I contacted the Democratic officer about just on page 9 of our papers. This is to do with the Lansdowne Lawn Tennis Club application. It states that he, which is me, stated that the capacity of the tennis club would increase by 30%. I actually was referring to the capacity of the tennis club court lighting would increase by 30%. So the increase was about the lighting, not about the number of members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hounsell. So, Councillor Jackson, are you happy to incorporate that small change? So we have that motion from Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Hounsell, subject to the change. All those in favour? Thank you. Okay. Okay, everybody happy with the site visit? We'll do that between now and the next committee meeting, and then we'll go through this all again at the next meeting. That's okay. Okay. Okay, so where are we? 9, appeals report. Any questions or comments on the appeals report? Councillor Jackson.
Yes, thank you very much. Again, you know, we commend the officers for their success rate, first division and all that. But I just wondered, with regard to the Resourceful Earth Limited application, where the appeal has been withdrawn, whether our officers are now considering, there was an enforcement issue, if I remember rightly, about some unlawful structures on the site, whether they're going to go ahead with enforcement now.
I pass to our Deputy Head of Planning for an answer to that one.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm afraid I'm going to have to report back to you on that, which I can do through the chair, possibly, if that's the best thing, so the whole committee can find out. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else got any comments on the appeals reports? If not, the committee is asked to note the report. Next meeting will be on Wednesday, 19th of October. We do have a site visit, so if you can put that in your diaries for Monday, the 10th of October. Other than that, if nobody's got anything else to say. So the site visit is Monday, the 10th. Next meeting, Wednesday, the 19th. Okay. Other than that, I'll close the meeting. Thank you, everybody.